Good afternoon.
Welcome, everyone. I could be wrong, but I think everybody knows the gentleman sitting to my left. Is that right? If you know he is the sharp, influential, and irreverent guy, can he get a round of applause real quick so I know where we are? All right, let's get to it then.
Okay.
I'm sure his distinguished career will come up as we're speaking, but what I really want to talk about is Chicano art, especially the journey that you've had and the success you've had creating the Cheech Center for Chicano Art and Culture. But let's start a little before that. Tell me about the first time you truly appreciated a work of art and what eventually led you to become an art collector.
Oh, that's a good question. I learned about art at a very early age. I had this group of cousins, and we were all kind of bright kids, went to Catholic school, and liberal arts education, and the head cousin, I think I was 10 at this time, 10 years old, and he decided that we were going to learn about other stuff like AP classes, and he assigned all of us a topic to learn about, and I got art. So how do you learn about art? You know, I don't know. I was 10 years old. And so I went to the library and started taking out all the art books. So they wouldn't let me take them out because I was 10. And so they would sit them in front of me and then turn
Can't
the
trust
page.
10-year-olds.
Yeah, you know, especially 10-year-olds. And I would learn about art that way. Okay, that's Degas. Is that how you say it? Okay, Degas, Cezanne, Michelangelo. And every Saturday I would go to the library. And so that's how I learned about Western art. And so it was an interesting body of knowledge to have, but the most interesting component was that we went to museums, you know, and you saw paintings in person, which is how you have to see paintings. You have to see them in person. So all my young life, I was cognizant at any rate about art.
Do you remember perhaps the first work of art that you saw at a museum that really, really struck you?
Yeah, I was in Amsterdam making a movie with Tom H. Chong, and the Rijksmuseum was open, and I went into it because it had some of my favorite Dutch and painters, and the Rembrandt's The Night Watch is in that museum, and all I ever saw it was in reproduction. You know, so okay, there's a bunch of guys, you know, look like she could be on a cigar box, you know, and so, and I don't know, but you go into the room and it's huge. It's a mural. It's a like I was astounded, you know, that it could make that impact on me after seeing it so little. Well, this thing is huge, and it was almost, I think it was the only painting in the room, and I just stood there I was in there for an hour, like look, you know, at every angle, and so how did he do that, and that really influenced me. And at the same day, I went to the restaurant that they have, ordered some lunch, had a couple of drinks, and came out and there's a sign, what's I'm blanking on this, Vermeer, Johannes Vermeer, and just it was exactly the opposite. You know, I'd seen those in reproduction, and they're tiny paintings. They're like little, you know, like that. And I go, wow, that made a big, you know, influence on me. So if I ever do a museum show, I'm going to do big paintings and little tiny ones.
It's so interesting, you know, people, the Mona Lisa is a great example. If you've never had the chance to go see it in the Louvre, it's always much smaller, you know, than you think it is, but it has this grand place in our imaginations and in like art history.
And farther away than you want it to be. You know?
Yeah, always farther away.
Glass.
They won't even let you touch it.
I don't know, you can't even get near it. Hi, Mona, you know, it's like, yeah.
So fast forward from this Rembrandt really inspiring you to put on a show where you can see things as they are meant to be seen on a grand scale, or something that draws you in up close. Tell us about some of the art that inspired you to start collecting this impressive tranche of Chicano art that you have.
The ones that I collected?
Yeah.
You know, I knew about Western art, but I didn't know about contemporary art, and that was the big. So I was married to a painter at the time, and she started taking me to all these galleries in the west side of L.A. and like, oh, I'm seeing what everything is contemporary, and that's where I discovered these Chicano painters, and I recognized right away what they were doing because it was built on classical art, because they were all university and or art school trained painters. They weren't backyard weekend enthusiasts. They were serious painters, but there's all those elements of their education being represented, and also their Mexican heritage, and also their Chicano, emerging Chicano identity. And so it's like I get it. It's like hearing the Beatles for the first time. When you hear the Beatles for the first time, it's like, well, that's Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis and Carl Perkins, and I know it, but it's in English with an English accent, and they have different, interpretation of it. So that's what the Chicanos were doing. They were taking the art that they had learned and the art that they grew up with whenever they went home, and combining them into this new kind of form of art.
That's such a great, I love that Beatles reference. When we were backstage just now, we were talking about Jimi Hendrix and how he was only able to find success by moving to England, like going to a place where it would be, his blues would be separate from everything else around him, and where he could like grow and flourish. So this adventure that kind of culminates in the Cheech really begins with the touring exhibition, Chicano Visions.
Yeah.
Can you, nice.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about how Chicano Visions came to be a touring exhibition, and what your vision was from there into what now has culminated in the Cheech?
Oh, that's a long road.
Take your time.
Okay. Can we smoke a joint? Because it'll be a much better. I started collecting. I seeing these Chicano artists, the first question that popped in my mind is, why aren't they in more museums? Why aren't they getting gallery shows, of which they had none? Because this is really great art that they're doing. And I said, well, and that's the only explanation I ever got. Okay, well, that explains everything. And so I said, well, I'm buying this art, because I was an inveterate collector of something all my life: baseball cards, buttons, everything like that. And so I had a penchant for collecting. And so I said, I'm going to start collecting Chicano art now. And I was really the only guy out there collecting it on a large scale, because nobody kind of knew about it. And so I started collecting this art. I started amassing this collection. And my friends that I start making now in the art world said, well, you got to show this. I said, well, yeah, how do you do that? Well, you got to go to a museum and get them to do a show. Okay, how do you do that? Well, you got to. Well, first of all, if you want to put on a show, you got to have a sponsor. Okay, how do you do that? I said, well, you got to go ask her. So I
feel there's a theme.
Yeah, like what does this guy know? I think that's the theme. And so I said, okay, well, because I had a big collection at this point, and I said, well, you got to go to corporate America. So I went around to, me and my team, we went around to General Mills, General Motors, anything with a general in it, they got to have money, they're generals, So, and so they almost, all of them almost did it because they wanted to reach that audience, but they didn't. And they were like, so I kept getting frustrated. So finally the Army wanted to sponsor the show, and I almost did it just to piss everybody off, because I was tired of this shit at that point, and saying no, So, but finally, the Target stores and Hewlett Packard stepped up, and they sponsored the show and the production of it, and we went on to tour 14 major institutions in 7 years, starting with the Smithsonian. And ending up in Waco, Texas, I think. But it's that because now I had sponsorship, because I was the perfect storm. I knew what the art was, I had money to collect it, and I had celebrity in order to proselytize for it. So I could get I could get stuff done. This show could get into museums where, like, if Joe Blow had the exact same collection, it would be harder for them because they didn't have anything to publicize, besides the art that nobody knew about, So we crossed our fingers and overcame all the hurdles that were put in front of us, not only by the existent museum world, but by even the Chicano academic world. Because there was a big deal there about using the word Chicano and who's allowed to use it and who's not allowed to use it. And you really got inspected for that. And so all these museum directors were afraid to, step up and put their head in the block, because they liked their jobs so far. And they didn't want to do that. So finally, San Antonio Museum of Art stepped up and said, okay, we're going to say this is Chicano, because I wasn't an expert. Well, I became an expert in the field, but I wasn't like a college professor. I had a PhD and unpaid student loans. I wasn't one of their guys. And so we opened the show in San Antonio first, and then we went on to greater success. Thank you. But it was not easy. I mean, really not easy. The first time we opened in San Antonio, it was a great show, and Los Lobos played, and there was free beer and tequila, so that went over really big. But there was a segment of the Chicano academic community that had this theory that Chicano art could only be political art. And I said, well, I got all this other Chicano, and so he had roused all the students against me, and they come up to me, well, where's all the political art? Well, how about the rest of the palateros that were standing in front of? So they did. I said, okay. Everybody's got a beef. We're going to have an open forum tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the museum, and whatever you got to say, come and say it that. And I said 9:30 just to weed out half the crowd, because I know we're going to get up that early on a Saturday. Are you kidding? And so we had this forum, and everybody said what they wanted, and the veteranos, man, they wanted, they had their point of view, and the young artists, they wanted to get their art shown, and it was going back and forth. Pretty soon, the veteranos kind of saw that they were outnumbered, and they were going to miss Menudo if they didn't get out of here now, And so at the end of the thing, there was a bunch of people on the dais, and one of them was John Valadez. And if you know anything about Chicano art, you know that John Valadez is one of the OG painters of the Chicano movement. And this older lady got up, and it looked like she had seen everything Chicano, in her life. And she goes, I have a question for John Valadez. Okay. And he says, considering what you've heard today, do you still consider yourself a Chicano painter? And John looked up at the ceiling for a little while and says, only if it bothers you. My hero, and he's been my hero to this day, man. And that's an essential quality of Chicano art. You can't, And so that guided my path from that day forward.
I love that idea of kind of egging people on a little bit in order to do what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, to be true to yourself, sometimes you have to poke some people in the chest.
Yeah, and you have to be louder too. Artists are not traditionally louder, but the Chicano guys were.
So from this traveling exhibition, it started in 2001?
Yeah, I think it's 2001.
That leads up to last year when the Cheech opened.
Yeah.
Now, opening a museum, I assume, is no small feat.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that you're rich, but museum rich? I'm not sure.
No, that's what it was. They came to me with this offer. The city of Riverside, California, came to me with this offer because we had done a show there of, I think it was Works on Paper, and it was the biggest show they ever had by a lot. And they had this building. I don't know if you know anything about Riverside, California, but it's a historic California town. And in 1880, it was the richest city per capita in the United States, because of citrus. They grew everything: citrus, oranges, grapefruits, tangelos, and they built a railroad into the groves and picked it, and with packing houses, and they sent it out around the world. That's how you could get an orange on Christmas morning in London, England, because of Riverside, California. And so they had a lot of money, and they commissioned all these historic buildings and stuff. And the one building that they really in the end didn't like, because it wasn't Beaux-Arts, it was a mid-century building, mid-50s, and it was a town library. And they're going to build a new town library down the street. One of the kind of library with flashing lights, and all that shit that everybody's building around the world. So to repurpose the building, and they came to me and offered me the building for the collection. And at first I didn't realize what they were asking. Would you want me to buy a museum? I'm doing okay, but I ain't museum rich, honey, And so, no, we want to give you the museum. We don't want to give you the museum, the building. We want to provide it for you, for your collection. You give us the collection, and we'll put it there for all and in perpetuity, and everybody will come and be the first Chicano museum. Okay. I said, and I felt like, in the Wizard of Oz, where the house is falling from the sky. That's what I felt like. And it's like, see this thing, and if you just stand on the X, it's going to fall on you. So that's what happened, and we started on this road, and it was easy in that they came to me. The city came to me. I didn't come to the city. It was easy in that regard, but then started the battle. Now it's a public institution, and you got to listen to everybody else, which I would, as many times I stopped in this process, I wish I was just a guy with a collection, because what I learned in this process is there's nothing more expensive than a free gift.
So
It's true, man. Every time I turned around.
True, yeah. So how did your storied background as an entertainer, musician, recording artist, how did all this personal experience influence how you want to show this wonderful collection of yours, and how you feel people would best kind of learn about this underrepresented and underseen Chicano art?
Yeah. Well, with the collection, I starting with the Chicano Visions, and we started in San Antonio, and then played all these big museums, the Smithsonian, the De Young, LACMA, and after that show stopped, I said, well, I want to keep going. This is a really great experience, and we're accomplishing stuff here. So how do I keep on going? So I split the collection up into different components, works on paper, works about religion, works by women, blah, blah, blah. So we could play smaller museums, because they don't have such a long lead time. Major museums, you're going to wait 5, 6, 7, maybe longer years to get in, even if they want to. And so I started playing all these smaller museums. So in the end, the collection had played in over 50 museums, which is unheard of for a private collection, because they don't want to do that, and I understand why. They think you're going to come in and play the museum, and then you're going to sell all the works for a much inflated price, because the art market is going to go nuts because they've seen Chicano art for the first time, and that's not going to happen. But it was that kind of process, So I just kept going because I had fun being out there.
It really sounds, the way you're describing it really sounds like a band getting, starting at little clubs and chinchorros, and then kind of building up their career into playing an arena.
Except that we started in the arena first. It's like, okay, because my concept at the beginning, because I'm not going to play I'm not going to preach to the choir in this tour. I'm not going to go to museums that already knew about Chicano art. I wanted to go into major museums with the trumpets blaring and the banners waving and walk in the front door. And that had not happened yet, but it was going to happen now because with corporate sponsorship. And I thank you to the Target stores. So you're all obliged to shop at Target for the next 3 years. So it's good deals. They got great things for low prices and hip.
I think there's a video here.
Really?
Coming up next.
If America's composed of immigrants, then this is the ultimate American School of Art.
I want other Chicanos to recognize themselves in the artwork and feel proud of our culture.
The ironic thing is that the piece is called Car Show, but you hardly see the cars.
We want to talk about space and art, and they didn't want to listen to us, so it turned into a whole wall of conflict. That's what this particular painting was about.
There was some congressman that said, hey, we should be very wary of the Mexican Americans because they come from a long line of bloodthirsty savages like the Aztecs.
I'm asking you to marry me.
You belong to a different tribe, Savage.
Chicanos just happen to be great painters.
I think blues are the colors of our raza because we live in the shadows of the American dream.
I put the cracks in the ground because of what's happening at home. My parents' marriage was falling apart.
We're Chicanos.
Chicano, to me, defines my Americanism.
I like the sound of the word. Cheech, Chema, Chewy.
And I define Chicano painting by painting.
It's just a revolution to me.
These museums, these institutions have gone from no, we don't even recognize you, this is not really art, to hey, we have to embrace this because this is part. We're living in a city called Los Angeles, not Los Angelos.
That was fun, that period. You know, that was fun.
So
I like to fight too. It's like
watching that that video, and the music in that video was great, by the way. I'm very interested in how you define or don't define the term Chicano. There's so much talk today about, you know, Latinx versus Latino or Chicano versus Chicanx, but it could be, I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts because I feel like it could be person to person. Yeah, what do you think?
You know, Chicano is a voluntary category. There's no box you can check on the census that says Chicano. You know, it's a voluntary category. So I took that cue and said, well, okay, we can have voluntary rules too. You know, we can make this up as we go along, you know, it can be our definition, because we were tired of being defined by other people. We're going to have our own definition, and it's called Chicano. Chicano was originally a derisive term from Mexicans to other Mexicans, and the concept being that the Mexicans who had moved from Mexico and now were living in tin shacks along the border in Texas and Arizona and California were no longer truly Mexicanos anymore because they had left their country. They were something less. They were little satellite Mexicans, little chicos, little Chicanos, you know? And that's where the term came from, according to me, where the term came from. You know, they weren't Mexicans, they were like Chicanitos, you know, they were little Chicanos. And so depending on where you lived in relationship to the border, it was more or less an insult. And as time went by, and the kids that were born in the United States, my father, who died at 93, some years ago already, always called himself a Chicano, you know, even though he didn't speak English when he started school. And so that's how they viewed themselves, and that's how I viewed myself. When I lived in an all-black neighborhood when I first grew up in South Central, and it was always, yo, Mexican, you know. I'm not Mexican. I've never been to Mexico. I don't speak Spanish. How am I Mexican, you know? And one day I came home from work, and my uncle Rudy and his family was there having dinner, and he's telling the story about, he says, yeah, I went down, I was trying to get his car fixed. And I went to the garage, and the guy says it's going to cost $250. And I said, hey, man, give me a pair of pliers and some tinfoil. I'll fix it. I'm a Chicano mechanic, you know. And I go, that's what I want to be. That's what it is. That can-do spirit. Nothing can stop you, you know. So like, it was like, that's what I identified with as a Chicano from that day forward. But, you know, whether you want to call it Chicano, Chicano X, Latinx, Mexican American, this whole school of art defines. It's based on description of culture. It's the same influence. I mean, it's the same thing that we're describing in 1,000 different shades of brown, and it continues on through these years. You know, and I get it why the different generations want to call it something different, because you want to identify it with your group, your age group, and who you want to. You can call it anything you want. You know. That part doesn't bother me at all. If you want to be Chicano X, cool. Malcolm X was that Malcolm. You know, he did an X. You know, so okay, cool with me. But it is all description of culture. You know, and from our most public moments and fighting for the rights of the Chicano audience, or the most intimate moments of your life and your love and your children and your family. But that whole continuum is what makes Chicano art. And we're going to have these discussions at the Cheech, and that's exactly why I want to be there, because it's a cultural center. It's not only a repository for a collection. We're going to define all kinds of aspects of Chicano culture. I just had dinner last night with Robert Rodriguez, my old friend, local. Any local yokels here? I've made 8 movies with him, so you know he's part of family. It's like everybody who comes into his family I'm an uncle to his kids. You know, just like my Uncle Rudy was an uncle, and it wasn't until my 40s that I found out he wasn't really my uncle. In true Chicano spirit, he and my dad grew up together on the same block, you know. So he was there with Chicano. He's Uncle Rudy, but Robert's going to head the film department at the Cheech, and we're going to develop that, and we're going to develop Chicano film more than it is now, even, and we hope that turns out well. And towards the eventual goal of starting the world's first lowrider museum, which I'm really. Nice. I love that it gets that big reaction. No matter where I go, all over the world, it gets exactly that reaction, because it's a worldwide phenomenon right now. They got lowriders in Tokyo, you know. So there you go. Chicano culture spreads. You know, it spreads so far you don't even know it's Chicano anymore in its origin. You got it, brother. And we do have pride. We have a great pride of everything we do. You know, there'll be a literature department. There'll be a movie department. There'll be probably music. You know, we're doing one step at a time, but it's all anchored by this collection that's there because it is the first Chicano collection. And events happened so that I am convinced that it was meant to happen as fate. You know, this is, and I've got everybody that's on the board convinced of that too, you know, because it was meant to happen. It was meant to happen in this town who invited me, which is 52.5% Chicano, identifies as Chicano. And you know, all these things can join. The most important thing was they accepted the whole collection. Where are you going to find a museum that's going to accept 550 pieces of art? How's that going to fit in their collection? You know, and the role that they already have playing. This was a dedicated museum from its inception, and we'll grow it from there. Yeah. It was meant to happen.
I love that. You said a couple times just now that it felt like it was meant to happen, because the more that I read about the center and Chicano Visions, it seems like such a natural progression from the Cheech and Chong, like the early stuff. You know, you're teaching white folks about stuff they didn't know that's always been around. Yeah, it's always been right in front of them.
When you get a Chicano lowrider and a half Canadian, or a Canadian, half Chinese, half English, Irish, person that joined together to represent hippie culture. That's meant to happen. There's no other explanation for it, like it's okay, these two guys are what hippies are. A lowrider and the Chinese guy? Okay, sure. America, fuck yeah. That's it, man. It's that sense of humor, too, that everybody identifies with no matter where you go. So it was meant to happen.
So has your past career influenced the collection in any way? And has it influenced how you speak about it or the way you promote it? Because like you said earlier, a big part of it was people didn't know this art was around. It needed like a fire, this celebrity Chicano fire underneath it.
Yeah,
get people interested.
That was the absolutely, the essential part of it. Well, not the most essential part, but the essential part of it because now we could get into museums because of my celebrity. It was much easier than being somebody who worked all their lives and knew everything and went to school for it and blah blah blah. I knew about art, but I had no provenance or to present myself in that forum, but it was meant to happen. Whether it was meant to happen with me and it could happen a lot faster, and we could get in a lot bigger museums, and we could attract corporate sponsorship. I was, because of that confluence of celebrity and knowledge and putting together this whole thing. And I just you learn in your life as you go on how to recognize opportunity when it presents itself to you, and you you hone your instinct to recognize that. And so when I saw this offer come in, and I go, okay, but you have to give up the collection. It doesn't belong to you anymore when you give it to them. Okay, let's go. The free beer and tequila for everybody. It's like, is that going to? Yeah, that made a difference. That's because we're Chicanos. Yeah.
I think we have some slides coming up of works of art from the collection.
Yeah.
I'd love it if I can flip through,
Sure.
not too slowly, but kind of tell us why you love the piece or something about the artist.
Sure.
I just want to give everyone a chance to see some of the wonderful stuff that will be on view.
This one is Sunset Crash. It's by Carlos Almaraz, who is probably the founder of Chicano art and as a school, and he was a brilliant artist, and he was the first one to say we are distinct in what we were doing, and we're describing culture, and it's a distinct avenue that we're painting, and it could only be done by Chicanos, and he gathered everybody else to follow that vision, and then as soon as he established it, he left public work and went to the studio and just made private work, true Chicano spirit, but he rose to prominence on a series of these car crash paintings, which I think there's only 5 or 6 of the paintings, and the art world really paid attention when these came out, and then he kept going on and making other iconic works, and he died early. That's a shame, and I never got to meet him. I had plenty of opportunity, and I thought, well, I'll just meet him next time, and I sometimes I make it a point not to meet my idols because you don't want to, be disappointed. I don't think I would have been disappointed in him because he was a brilliant guy, but I never got a chance to. And then the painting next to it, the rest of the Paleteros, is by Frank Romero, and it's a big painting, and it depicts actual events in Los Angeles in Echo Park, and this is a lake that there was a lot of activity around the lake. That there was gangs, there was drugs, there was prostitution, there was all kinds of criminal things going on. And so they were going to clean up the Echo Park, and so they went on and arrested the ice cream man first. the paleteros because actually they wanted to get the street vendors out of there, for I don't know what reason. They weren't as dangerous as the gangbangers, let me tell you, and so they sent the SWAT team in, so that's why you see the kids with the popsicles raised above their heads, like, oh, okay. It pointed out the absurdity of the approach to what they were trying to do. But this is Arrest of the Paleteros by Frank Romero, who's still painting. The next one is John Valadez, who I spoke of but before. This is called Getting Them Out of the Car, and it depicts the aftermath of a drive-by shooting, and kids are dead, and the spirit is arising, and the most intriguing part of this picture for me is that it's a pastel. It's a pastel. It's not a painting. It's not a watercolor. It's a pastel. And pastels are a very blunt instrument. They are just used to make trees or something before. But he's using it photographically, realistic. And I don't know what this is called, but anyways, but to use that blunt instrument to make a finely tuned picture like this I even got reviewed. He got well, no, they argued with his ability or right to use a pastel with these kind of drivers. Well, no, they're supposed to be for trees and flowers and. Yeah, okay,
pushing against that chest again. Like,
yeah, it's pushing
exactly
against that. It's like. Okay, but okay. Well, this is by what's her name again? Judith. Oh, I'm sorry. Judith Hernandez, and this was a recent acquisition by the Cheech. We bought this, and she was She was in Los Four. She was number 5, Los 5, and she was the only woman in the group, and she very quickly moved from. L.A. to Chicago to care for her mother, I think there was one. And so she wasn't around when I was collecting, and so I didn't know anything about her. But she's a wonderful, and she's going to do the next solo show at the Cheech. And so we're really proud to have her work with us. The other one, this is El Verde, I think, and it's by
Aguilar?
Yeah.
Aguilar?
Oh, Candy Aguilar. Yeah, he's from Corpus Christi, Texas. Yay, Corpus. And the reason I have these different, because there was basically 3 places where Chicano art was flourishing: L.A., San Francisco, and San Antonio, Texas. But you had to kind of, if you weren't in L.A., you had to kind of go to these places to find these artists. And luckily, I was a touring comedian, so I got to go to all these places as a part of my job, and I could go to Corpus Christi, Texas, and see the Chicano art there, which, most of these guys in the day couldn't get a gallery. We were selling this other art, so, but I went and hey man, these guys are flourishing here, what is it? How come nobody knows about them? Because they don't, because nobody's put them in a gallery so well. So I started collecting their art. This is a recent acquisition. He's a XAO kind of ending, but he does wonderful work.
I just wanted to remind everyone that if you have questions for Cheech, you can use the South by Southwest app, and in a few minutes I'll read them out. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to sit where I'm sitting, metaphorically speaking, obviously, because I'm not going to get up.
Okay. Or just keep them to yourself, and I'll think about them. I'll get them psychically or something.
Now, I heard, from Chicano Visions to the birth of the Cheech, you're talking to all these institutions. I know that's not easy. You're talking to corporate sponsors, convincing them that your vision is worth, investing in. I know that's not easy. From what I understand, you meditate regularly
every day,
and you have 3 kind of guiding mantras that have helped you succeed and accomplish all this. Can you talk a little bit about your meditation practice and share these mantras with us?
I don't know what those mantras are, but I'll think of it by the time I get to it. I discovered or got introduced to transcendental meditation when I was 19 by my girlfriend, and so whatever she did, I did. You know how that goes. And she introduced me to transcendental meditation right away. It made sense to me, and it made me feel great. And I've done it twice a day, every day, till today. So that's really kind of the guiding light. The mantras. There's a mantra I tell my kids. I say, you're Chicanos, so you have to have 3 jobs simultaneously all the time. And I don't know if there's any others. Are there? What are they? Remind me. They're probably good.
I know there's positivity.
Yeah.
Is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I have to pull out my phone for the other 2, and
There we
I
go.
don't know if I'm going to do that.
Remember. I've recently been diagnosed with CRS. Can't remember shit. So I'll be excused for anybody's name or movements or dates.
So do you have any advice for the artists in the audience or enthusiasts who would be interested in promoting or preserving Chicano art as part of the American canon, which is, that's, I think, one of the big takeaways is Chicano art is American art as much as, art from Boston or art from New York or, from Los Angeles or Seattle. What advice would you give us to make or create or keep promoting this art?
Well, the biggest boost you can get is going to the Cheech. I mean, now we have a place where before we didn't. Now there is a place. And all the reviewers have mentioned that. Now there is a place to come and study Chicano art. It's not just a few paintings as some museums have. Now it's a whole museum dedicated to that. So you learn about it. Learn about what the history of it and learn about what other artists are doing so you can find your inspiration maybe in there. But I studied art all my life, and I know all the schools, and and to my way of thinking, because of its description of culture for a long period of time, that it's still going, that they want to chop up in littler pieces, small bite-sized Chicano pieces. I think it is the best description of culture that's ever been done in this country. Exclusively, and it continues on to this day, in the face of not even being recognized for a great majority of its lifetime. But now we are on that path, and so you can't unsee Chicano art at this point, because it'll be everywhere for you, And because I believe the American dream, I believe that everything they offer and promise is going to apply to me, and I've never not believed that, So that's kind of the message I send out. As a practical thing for every artist, keep painting, keep drawing, keep throwing clay, keep whatever you do, keep doing it, keep doing it. And make sure everybody if they walk into your house or you go to a gallery or whatever, and they see it and you talk about it, and go to museums. Really go to museums, and because that's why they're there. They're there for you not to hear about them. They're there for you to go and be influenced by all that art that's out there. Now we have a Chicano. There's somebody from the Czech Republic. I just heard a Czech joke before I walked out here. Can go in and see that, and they should be just as influenced and just as impressed by this school of art as any other school of art that's ever existed. So that's and this house here is Jacinto Guevara. He lives here in Austin, I believe now. He's from L.A., but he moved to, I believe it is Austin, or in San Antonio? One of the Mexican towns. Anyways. And he draws, this is one of the phases he's in now, he draws little neighborhood houses, and they're just spectacular when you see them in person. And they're just beautiful. There's got a lot of them, so. And I was the only guy buying his paintings. I mean, as far as I know, I was the only guy. And they were really cheap in comparison, but they're beautiful. And every time he would send, because I have a relationship with all the artists that I collect, I've known them for a long time, and I go to their studios, and I know their kids, and so we have a connection. So they send me works in progress all the time, or here's what I'm doing lately, and half of it is to I hope you buy it, and half of it is I want you to see my progress. So I like that combination. But these are little houses, and they're, when you see them in person, they're just like mind blowing. They're really good. This is another painting next to it called California Natives by Carlos Almaraz. It's a big painting. It's one of these huge ones. Because very early in this process, I realized that I'm putting together a collection that's going to play in museums. I realized that. So I'm going to have museum-size art in this thing. So I could buy big paintings like 24 by 12 feet. Where are you going to put that in your house? But it will look good in a museum. So kind of that's what I did. And a lot of the bigger paintings, I knew the artists, I knew their work, and I never saw them in person. I just saw a picture of them, and I would buy them, and they would go directly to storage until they were called on stage, and that's happening. Here's the next one. This one is called Exiles off Main Street, and it's by Benito Huerta from Houston, Texas. Hey, Houston. Another big center of Chicano art, and it's obviously a comment on Picasso's Los Damoiselles d'Avignon, but it's on velvet. This painting is painted on velvet. It's usually Elvis or Madonna or something, but it's painted on velvet. But this is and it has applications, it has earrings, lip rings, blah, blah, blah. And the other side of it. That sheet it's lead. It's a lead sheeting, and I saw this painting in a show in Houston, and I walked, and I was just starting to amp up the collecting, and it's a big painting. And I was really struck by it right immediately, because of the figures. They were, again, classical art, contemporary art, modern art, and on velvet with these other characters, and then this lead sheet. So I said, well, I'll just walk around this show to see what else they got, and I'll come back to this. But the time I got back, then it was sold. So that's part of collecting learning. You have to learn to get it when you see it, if you can afford it. But anyways, eventually, the person who bought this died, and his son knew that I liked his painting, so he contacted me and said, would you like to get it? I said, absolutely, send it over. And then now it is ensconced in the museum. And so I asked Benito, what is the story about this painting? He says, well, these women, because the original painting, Les Damoiselles d'Avignon, they were about the prostitutes that hung around the Bois de Boulogne there in Paris, where he was living. And he said, Picasso said, art is everything. And Kandinsky said, art is nothing. So that's why the lead sheet. And it weighs about 250 pounds, and they hate moving this shit, man. You get the biggest guys, don't drop it. But it's now ensconced in the Cheech, and it's a wonderful, wonderful painting, man. And it just gives you joy when you see it.
I'd love to see if there are any questions from the audience that I believe will pop up. Here we go. From Carlos Martinez, would you speak on the future of how art can make the world a better place? What is the passion that drives you to achieve your success in the art world?
Yeah, I think absolutely art has traditionally made the world a better place. When they're making art, they're not out fighting. It's just as simple as that. And what is the passion? I love art, man. I think art is transformative, and I think everybody would kind of join in that opinion. Art is transformative. When you see a work of art that like, wow, this is really cool, and it doesn't have to be any more complicated or intellectual than that, because everything about the painting should hit you at once. Yeah, that's cool, and that's the best words to describe it. You can describe it analytically, but it's an emotional feeling, when a really great work of art is presented in front of you, like, wow, that's transformative. So that's what keeps me going, because I find new paintings all the time, because all these artists are working at the top of their game right now, so that's part of it.
That actually leads right into the next question from Richard. you said you find these artists all the time. Do you pick all of the art, or do you have a team that helps you?
No, I pick all the art. I have a couple people that work for me that kind of live in different parts of Houston, Texas, or Corpus Christi, and so then they let me know about what's going on, and then they'll send me pictures about, and then I'll pick, sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. It's all a personal collection, but now we're in a public museum, so, it's, yeah, all right. But no, it is a personal collection, and I think that's what kind of made it true. It's one vision, and it doesn't have to be the only vision, but I've been studying this since I was 10 years old, so there you go.
See, Jessica asks, what is your favorite work of art in your collection?
I don't have one. It's like having a favorite kid.
With 550 kids.
Yeah, well, the one that's bugging you the least at the time is your favorite kid, because I have 4 kids, and they all have their moments where like, I got part, but at different ages, they're all out of the house and gone and doing their own thing, but I don't have a pick because the next piece of art that I see is my favorite. Like, wow, we got to get this, okay. And now we have a whole team of people that support the Cheech now. It was wonderful that it landed in Riverside, because it was a very rich town, and there's people in there with big trust funds, and they're big supporters of the art and of the museum, so they help contribute to acquiring pieces. There's a big, when you walk, every one of you was going to go to the Cheech at some point. I predict this. Right? You're going to be in California, you're going to be in LA, and you're going to drive to Riverside. It's only about an hour 15. It won't kill you. And they'll come out and they'll see all this art, and it is truly mind-blowing, it really is. And the first piece you'll see when you walk in there is this giant lenticular piece. Lenticular, I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but the little prizes you used to get in Cracker Jacks, where the eyes of Jesus move as you follow it up? That's lenticular. It's a plastic prismatic field that changes the image depending on where you stand in relation to it. So it's always in motion. And the De La Torre brothers are the #1 world's practitioner of this. And so we commissioned them to do this 26 by 13 foot lenticular piece that we had to cut out a rectangle in the bottom floor of the second story for this piece to fit all the way through. But it's the first thing you see when you walk in a museum, and everybody wants their picture taken in front of that because it's just spectacular, and kids are fascinated by it, And so there is another advance that is particular to Chicano art now because of these 2 guys who are going all the world. They're getting very popular around the world for creating these installations, and they're my favorite kind of Chicanos, the De La Torre brothers, because they don't know they're Chicanos yet. And I like that part of it. They're from Mexico, Guadalajara, but they're a Mexican-Danish blend, and they grew up most of their life in San Diego, but they go back and forth. So how is that not being a Chicano, man? That is almost a definition of it, But they're coming around now. They're kind of seeing as they travel more and how it is. They go, maybe there's something to this Chicano, And so they're very happy because it's a voluntary category. You can volunteer at any time.
Let's see. Victor asks, how do you pass on your artwork for future generations to come?
Well, you have a museum.
Yeah, I was going to say. I feel like that's
you pass on.
It's and you don't have to be museum rich to do that.
No, you don't.
You just have to be incredibly talented and famous.
Well, that helps. It is like you get this big tax write-off for donating. If I live to be 3,000, I will not be able to take fully advantage of this tax write-off that you're supposed to get, man, because there's only a certain percentage of it. And you only have a small window of time to avail yourself of that thing. But I got a lot of pieces, and that's not what I'm in it for in the beginning, anyways. So I'm glad that everybody can come and see it.
I've got one last question. I
Okay.
guess we're going to wrap up after this. And I'm sure everybody's curious, what's your preferred mode for looking at all this art? Straight or stoned?
The both, man. The both, man. Like I just bought a piece by Margaret Garcia, and it's a beautiful piece. I mean, Margaret Garcia, she's a great painter, but she became a great painter. She wasn't a great painter to start. And I had a talk with her the other day. She was very perturbed that I had described her as the most improved painter in the whole group. I said, well, does that mean I wasn't good at the beginning? Well, you're not as good as you are now, and because she always considered herself wasn't one among the A-listers of the women painters, and so she was always striving to get the and I said, well, where do you consider yourself now? And it stopped her, because she's probably the number one woman painter in the collection. But it's just because this painting that I just bought from you, when I first met you, you couldn't do this painting because you didn't have the technique at that time. There was the start of that technique and the start of that ability, but you arrived at where you are now by painting every single day and improving every single day. So to be the most improved, that has to be a special place in this whole collection, as she is. Yeah. Have 3 jobs at all times.
Thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you, Cheech Marin, for all the insights and for
Thank you
a wonderful
very
time.
much. Thanks for showing up. Have a good bye at South by Southwest. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right.